Hello. Today we want to talk about the two most important questions in an interview. And these are the questions that you, the candidate, ask.
Yeah, but before we dive into that, I
Yeah.
know that you have some thoughts around just setting up the dynamic in the
Yes,
interview and
yes.
your mindset in the interview
Yes.
of how you should come at it. Yeah,
So, I
let's
mean,
talk
my
about that.
simple thing, and you're referring to what I say all the time, an interview is a conversation. It's not an interrogation. So the dynamic should be that you are both in the buyer's seat. The employer's looking to hire someone, you're looking to choose a place to work. You need to go in with that mindset. And we dive deeper into that in prior videos. But here, what I want you to understand is that the way to create that dynamic is to ask questions. Now, often you'll walk into an interview. We hear this a lot from our
Right.
students. We're going to talk. I'm going to ask you questions for 25 minutes. And then at the end, you have an opportunity to ask me questions for 3. And then I'll wrap up. So you're kind of like, okay, I can't even ask a question.
So now I'm in the hot seat.
Right, exactly. My general rule is if it is a panel interview
Yep.
and there are 6 people asking you questions, that structure is more important.
Okay.
But if it's just you and another person, I just don't think you should follow that rule.
Right.
I think that if they say something to you like, Susan, what would you do if you were opening up a new market in South America? Where would you start?
Mhm.
You know, I would ask the question based on my knowledge of the product and the company. That would be a very logical place for me to say, are you planning on opening up operations in South
Right.
America? Right? You wouldn't wait 25 minutes to ask that question. It just doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
So I don't mean that it should be a quid pro quo. You ask, I ask, you ask, I ask. We're not keeping score.
And that can also be off-putting.
Exactly.
If you become that person that's just asking 1,000
Yes,
questions,
yes.
that can not work in your
Often because it's forced.
favor. Mhm.
But if you have a naturally occurring organic question that makes sense in the context of that
Right.
moment in the interview, ask it.
Mhm.
But what we really want to talk about
Yes.
is the two most important questions to ask at the end of the interview.
At the end of every
Yes.
interview, no matter who you are, where you are in your job search,
Or
are
who you're talking
or
to.
who you're talking to. These are the questions you want to ask so that you can sleep at night.
So I'm going to role play. I just did this with a private client who's a fairly seasoned male in a job where he should know better.
Okay.
And I'm going to role play what a normal end of an interview looks like. So tee me up with something like, nice to see you. We'll be hearing from you shortly.
So this was great to get to know you. Thank you for coming in today. And we will be in touch.
Great. So this is what most people will say. Thank you so much, Kelley. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I'm a really great fit for this. And I hope you really pay attention to my experience in opening South American markets. And, I really look forward to hearing back from you.
Great.
So that would be level 1. That's what we hear most of the time. That's what people will say.
Okay.
A level 2 might be, Kelley, I really enjoyed our time together. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you in a couple of weeks. Can you tell me a little bit more about what I'll be hearing?
Right.
That would be pretty good. Because now I'm at least trying to nail down what to expect.
Oh, you got half of the 2 questions.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is what you need to say. Thank you, Kelley. I really enjoyed meeting you today, and I feel that much more confident that we're a good fit for each other. Can you please explain to me what the next steps in the process are? Now I'm nailing her down. I want to know what the next steps are. Not, can you tell me a little more, or accepting her, you will hear from us shortly. I want to know what the next steps are.
Yep.
All right. So
Okay.
give me an answer.
So next steps, we are going to finish the 3 interviews that we have left on
Okay.
the roster. And we should be in touch probably midweek next week about how that all turns out.
Okay. And so will there be follow-up interviews? Is that what we're going towards?
So yes, at that point, we would put you in the queue for meeting with other people that are going to be on your team.
Okay.
More of a panel interview. And that would be set up. We would set that up midweek next week.
Okay. Now I want you to notice she wasn't easy on me because she didn't give me the answer right away. She was still kind of vague. You have to know what the next steps are in the process.
Yep. And I'm trying to hedge my bet a little bit.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So now I'm going to ask her the most important question. Based on our conversation today, Kelley, are you comfortable recommending me to have that next interview?
I would say based on the conversation that we did have in this interview, you have many parts of what could be a real fit to pass you on. And I really do feel comfortable doing that.
Okay. So that's answer number
It's
1.
really easy on her.
Right. So, but we'll do the other 2 too. So I want to make sure you're very clear. It's always the same, no matter what level you are working, no matter what level you are of the interviewer. It's, can you please tell me what the next steps in the process are? Or
That's
some
question
version of
number
that.
1.
And then once you know what those steps are, based on our conversation today, are you comfortable recommending me for that next step?
That's a question.
All right.
Too.
So you might get a yes, like Kelley gave me. You might get a flat out no. That has happened maybe once because there was a very specific skill set the candidate did not have, and it was a foreign language.
Yeah.
And you can't just learn, you could go learn a new computer language pretty quickly, but you can't learn a foreign language that's adequately enough to conduct business that quickly, right?
More often, don't we hear
the middle?
Yeah. We have to get through these other interviews. I can't give you a definitive answer right now.
Right. That would be, and that's the way I would always answer that question. If someone, I was never asked it. Yeah. It's so rare that someone does this or asks these questions. But if she said that, so I'm going to role play. Kelley just said, I really can't give you an answer, Susan, because we have other candidates to interview. Then you can flip the question into a negative and say, I totally understand that. I wouldn't want you to answer the question prematurely. But based on our interaction today, is there any reservation you would have in pursuing me? Or is there any reason you wouldn't recommend me? Pick your language. Right. Play with a little bit on both questions, but make sure you are asking them.
Yes.
And this serves three purposes. Number one, the most obvious, now I know what's going to happen.
Yes.
And that is, knowledge is power. That's self-preservation.
Well, that keeps you from the rabbit hole at night. Exactly. Like I said earlier, this will allow you to sleep at night because now you actually have some context as to what is happening. Because what we will do as human beings is we want to wrap a story around it. So, I hit it out of the park. I felt really good. I thought I talked really good with the team. That's where we start. Right. Then you don't hear the next day. Then you don't hear the next day. Then the weekend comes by. Oh, I'll hear on Monday. Now it's Wednesday of the following week. You still haven't heard anything, but you have no information to tell you when you will or won't hear. But instead you make up in your mind, I blew that. It didn't go well. I wish I had answered this question differently. And so you can send yourself down either path. Yes. So why not get some knowledge?
Exactly. It's important for that self-preservation. It's important also to keep the steam going because I can't tell you how many times someone will say to me, it was a great interview, Susan. And I'll say, great.
Haven't you had that opportunity, with your own self where it's like, oh my gosh, I totally killed that. And then
but when you walk out of an interview and think you killed it, I want you to be able to say why you killed it. And the only way you can know you killed it is if the Kelley says, yes, you interviewed really well, and I'm going to recommend you for the next interview. Because I know that anyone who's ever interviewed with me over the 30 plus years I've been working has walked out of my office saying, I nailed it. She really liked me. And you know what? Most of the time I really do like you, but very few times am I willing to hire you.
Yes.
And that's what you want me to tell you, is whether I'm going to hire you or not. And in terms of that building the steam, sometimes when you leave an interview feeling like you've nailed it, even though you've no business thinking that, you take your foot off the gas because you kind of feel like you got this one going. So maybe, I'm not going to network anymore. I'm going to pass up on this interview. Yes. You can't do that.
Can't do that.
The only time you do that is when you have an offer in hand and you're starting.
Yes, like the next day.
Exactly.
Well, I want to just role play out if it's the final interview.
Yes, a little different.
Right? The close on the final interview. So those two questions, you're still going to use them, but they're a little bit different on the final interview with the hiring manager. Like, this is the person that can actually hire you.
So I think it's still okay to ask about next steps, but it's more, are there any future steps or is this it?
Yes. Okay. So that would be part one.
So it would be, Kelley, thank you so much for your time. I just want to know, are there any more steps in this process or are we at the end?
Yeah.
Clarify that, because the recruiter will sometimes tell you this is the last interview, but then you'll find out that they want to introduce you to the team.
Yeah.
So clarify it with with the hiring manager. Really enjoyed our time together. Can you just let me know, are there future steps here or are we done?
Okay.
And if they say there are future steps, then can you please tell me what they are? And then will you recommend me? If there are no more steps, then it's, if you were to say, no, Susan, this is the end of the line.
Yep.
Terrific. Well, Kelley, I feel really great about this opportunity, even more so now that I've met you.
Yep.
And I'd just like to know, are you prepared to make me an offer today?
Right.
It's a hard thing to say. It's a very vulnerable question to ask.
And often it will be, well, we have to get through the remainder of our interviews. You know that we have one other person that we're interviewing as well at the end of the line. And I really enjoyed you. I really can see from many aspects of where you can fit with our team. But we're going to have to get through that interview, and that's when we'll make our decision.
And in that case, there's not a whole lot more you can say. You need to honor that the person has another candidate. It's rare that you're the only candidate advanced to the final interview. So have to do a really good job on the first half of the interview. Ask the question. I always say that when someone, in the rare moment that someone asks me a question like that, they get so many points for asking.
Yes.
Even more so if you're in a job that's going to require you to network, negotiate, or sell.
Yes. And we've gotten feedback from our students who are out there actively interviewing that
Yes.
when they close with these 2 questions in particular, they have gotten feedback that is so powerful from the recruiter, from the hiring manager that ultimately ends up hiring them of, that really was impressive how you held my feet to the fire at the end there.
Yeah. And truthfully, in any role, even like a chemist who works alone in a lab, that person still needs to have some negotiating skills and some closing skills because they're still selling their research to investors so they can get grant money. So, I mean, it's such an important skill set in any role.
Well, and it's a show of confidence. It's a real show of confidence.
And we want to hire confident people.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So 2 questions, some version of, can you please explain to me what the next steps in the process are? And then whatever they are, do you feel comfortable after our conversation today recommending me for that next step?
Right.
Okay.
So there you have it. Those 2 questions you must ask on an interview. If you like what you heard today, you can like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about us and our programs, you can visit us at www.preparetolaunchu.com. Thanks.